Instead, it suggests that whether your needs include ISDN, ATM, or a combination of those and other services, Pacific Bell is committed to the philosophy of a seamless, per-application delivery of diverse technologies in a way that maximizes the efficiency of the customer's enterprise. Other industry participants are likely to do the same, bringing their unique set of core competencies to the table, along with a supporting design bias. Each possible solution will present its own investment opportunities and funding challenges as organizations compete for the capital required to deploy these much-needed network enhancements. While all of this is interesting, we must at some point ask ourselves the question, so what? We are in the midst of an emerging global economy in which technology has rendered the traditional limitations of distance to a great degree irrelevant for supplier and consumer alike. As such, developing and maintaining an international presence will be a key to sustaining growth. Ronald Schmidt of Bay Networks suggests that to accomplish this, globally distributed businesses need high bandwidth communications to function. A lot of productivity is wrapped up in high-speed bandwidth. And time is of the essence. I was on a flight recently with a business development manager from Ascend Communications. He shared with me that they feel they can no longer afford the luxury of annual budgets. Instead, they set targets and budget accordingly on a 90-day cycle. On the subject of time, Willem P. Rollins of Hewlett-Packard feels that the real dimension of competitive advantage is time, and that developing new products faster and solving customer problems more quickly is key to long-term competitiveness. In the end, we're talking about competitiveness in an emerging global economy where markets are international and all firms have the capacity to become multinational. Writing in the book, The Virtual Corporation, William Davidow and Michael Malone offered this observation. In years to come, incremental differences in companies' abilities to acquire, distribute, store, analyze, and invoke actions based on information will determine the winners and losers in the battle for customers. Given the richness of the technological and economic landscape we've just discussed, and its suggestion of natural selection, it seems appropriate to revisit the American Heritage Dictionary in search of a more organic definition of convergence. The adaptive evolution of superficially similar structures in unrelated species subjected to similar environments. Natural science provides us with an ideal metaphor. Telecommunications and information transport are no less Darwinian than biological subjects. And like their organic analogs, the challenge for industries, technologies, indeed even economies, whether nascent or well-established, is that of survival. The good news? You and I will be the final decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lenox. Let's begin the first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Therefore, we ask that only one question be asked per phone call, and that these questions be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone numbers or fax which now appear on your screen. We remind you to make your phone calls at a distance from the monitor to avoid feedback. Our first call is from Mexico, from the Instituto Tecnológico de Nogales in Sonora. Welcome. Your question, please.
La pregunta.
Nogales?
Nogales no está, no hay sonido.
I think we have
Creo que hemos perdido la llamada de Nogales.
We have a question by fax from... We go now to Saltillo, Mexico, for the first question. Welcome. Your question, please.
Adelante su pregunta. Muy bien.
Bueno.
¿Aló?
Bueno.
Diga.
Hablo del Instituto Tecnológico Saltillo.
I'm calling from Saltillo, Coahuila, Mexico.
Quisiéramos hacer la pregunta de cuáles serían los
What
problemas
would be the problems?
psicológicos,
I mean, the psychological problems,
políticos y sociales
political problems, and social problems
que trae consigo
that
esta nueva tecnología.
this new technology brings about, brings along.
Como
Hey.
por ejemplo, el uso
For
de-
example, the use of chats.
Esa es la pregunta.
That's our question.
Thank you. A large question.
Well, let me start with just talking a little bit about the information superhighway in general, and then perhaps Stuart could add a little bit as well. I think that the problems are with deployment. I think that would be the significant problem initially. And that is that we have a great deal of infrastructure to deploy in order for everyone to take advantage of this information superhighway. The good news is there is a significant amount of funding on a global level that is available to accomplish that. From a social perspective, I see primarily only benefits as opposed to problems. As we spoke earlier, the ability to really reach out and to get to our constituencies on a one-to-one basis, and I see that as a great opportunity.
Stuart?
Let me say right out that I want to be very blunt about this, that the Internet is a real threat to closed societies. I mean, those kind of societies like the fundamental Muslim societies of the East of Asia, which have basically shut off the Internet from access to the Internet to their citizens. And they do that for a very good reason, because from their perspective, it would be a great danger to them, because it is such an effective way of bringing ordinary people together. The Internet, you see, turns on its head the concept of mass communications that we have all grown up with, whereby the means of communication are consolidated in the hands of central authorities like governments and businesses. Communication can now arise from ordinary people's homes and offices. And that is a great threat, and it potentially does cause a problem to closed societies. My personal hope is that the ultimate effect of it will be that those societies will not remain closed for very long.
There's also the possibility of some forms of addictive behavior, people getting hooked on the Internet like they get hooked on television or anything else. But we need to move on to another question. We have a question from Brazil, from Key TV Communications Limited in Rio de Janeiro. Welcome. Your question, please. Brazil.
Brasil.
Hola,
Buenos días.
buenos días.
La pregunta, por favor.
El servicio de América Online,
America Online Service is very much used for recreational purposes, for entertainment, for young people like our children, for example. What are the most common uses, and what is the greater potential of this America Online as far as commercial or business purposes? And also, I would like to know whether the current rates are really justified.
Okay. America Online.
Want to take a shot?
Yeah, yes, as you're going to be seeing a little later in my presentation, my company is involved in an interesting project which conveys information in parallel both to the World Wide Web and to America Online. And although my personal preference when I use the Internet to do my research and gather information, my preference is for the World Wide Web, just for personal reasons. America Online is undeniably a very effective, a central way of disseminating information. It does, of course, have immediate potential for business, potential which is already being used. Unlike the World Wide Web, when as a subscriber to the America Online service you sign on, you are practically always greeted with a commercial message first off. And of course the businesses which use that space to convey their message are paying for that as they would for any other advertising. I think that the cost of that service is justifiable. Certainly I don't think it's unreasonable. considering the amazing resources that you can tap into by means of that service, or indeed any other entree into the internet as a whole, I don't think $20 a month is too much to ask.
When we advertise, we talk about, today in internet space, we talk about impressions and the number of impressions that we're able to make as a result of someone visiting our website. And if you think about the number of people that are there and their ability to reach you through that transaction on your website, you can begin to imagine the enormous commercial capabilities and opportunities that the web offers. And so, again, back to Stuart's point earlier, in many respects, just as mass communications has changed, so has mass marketing. We can now deal in markets literally of one. And it's the web that in many respects gives us that ability, because we know who our visitors are, and we can tailor our message very specifically to those individuals.
We have a question from a news site in Argentina, from Diario La Voz del Interior. Welcome. Your question, please.
Diario La Voz Interior, adelante. Good morning.
Hola.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Adelante, por favor, la pregunta.
Bueno, la pregunta que nosotros queremos hacer es la siguiente.
This is our question.
Se dijo que Internet es una nueva herramienta
Well, we have said that Internet is a new
para
tool
la democratización,
for democratization.
pero en Latinoamérica
But in Latin America,
los elevados costos de las
the high costs of telecommunications
y de los insumos
and every information product and computer product in general, as well as all our budget problems that we face in state-wide universities and education in general, public education, make accessing the web a very elitist service or possibility, because it is only applicable and feasible for a very small part of the population.
¿No piensan que en esta región
Don't you think that in this region,
puede agravar la brecha
Internet could actually widen the gap of knowledge between
entre clases pudientes y marginales?
the poor and the rich?
The information gap question. Very good one.
That's a very interesting question, and I'd like to address it this way. And again, I'll take it back to sort of the infrastructure level. I think the point that the caller's made is excellent and right on target. The good news is that there is a significant desire to invest in the Americas, in the Latin and American regions. There are a number of large corporations that are already engaged in partnerships with the carriers that are in the individual countries. So what does that mean? That means that significant investments are being made currently, and as those investments are made, the price, by virtue of what we know to be a market economies, the price of access is coming down. And so while we still perhaps have areas where the ability to get there is an elitist situation, I believe that that's a very short-term situation, that as money comes into the region and as infrastructures are improved, this issue will reconcile itself.
I just want to add that I want to thank the caller from Argentina very much for that question. It's extremely appropriate. I was involved in a very small way in the conversion of Argentina's television system to color back in 1981, I think that was, or maybe even 1980. And so I had the opportunity to visit your country, and I enjoyed myself, but I know exactly what you mean when you talk about the difficulty of access of poor people to the things that we would take for granted here in San Diego. I'm a little more pessimistic than my colleague here. I think this is a very intractable problem. I worry that we are developing a distinction between the information haves and have-nots. The only hope I see is that there is a very strong desire on the part of democratic governments to see that the means of access to the Internet get established in classrooms, in the schools. That, to me, is a great hope.
We have a call now from Mexico, from Cuautitlan, from the UNAM campus in the state of Mexico. Welcome. Your question, please.
Pregunta.
Sí. Sí, bueno.
¿Aló? Sí, diga.
Sí. Buenos días.
Buenos
Señor
días.
Hal Lenox.
Mr.
Desde un
Lennox,
particular punto de vista,
from your point of view,
¿sería tan amable de comentarnos
would you
cuál
please
es el
comment a little
requerimiento
more on the requirements?
mínimo de un equipo de cómputo?
The minimum requirements for a computer in a computer system
Para tener resultados óptimos en el Internet
to have the best results on the internet
y en el World Wide Web.
and the World Wide Web. What would be the kind of equipment that we would need to be able to surf the net properly, etc.?
It would be my pleasure to answer that. Thank you. The minimum requirements these days, I think, revolve primarily around the amount of RAM, or random access memory, that you have available. Many of the applets, which are the embedded applications that reside on the web, actually we download those from a server and run them on our local machine. And the thing that makes them run in a satisfying way is having enough RAM available on the computer. So I would say that a reasonably fast processor, something like a Pentium machine, if you have access to that, is good. But I think the processor takes back seat to the amount of memory that's available. Then, of course, as you engage in the web more and more, I think that the kind of graphics cards and graphics monitors that you employ, sound systems, things of this nature can also improve your time that you spend on the web.
What would you say, Hal, would be how much you'd expect to have to spend for a system that would be appropriate to today's World Wide Web?
Once again, being the believer in and the student of market economies and the invisible hand, the good news is supply and demand is working its wonderful actions again, and that is the price of machines of all types continues to plummet. As sort of a quick anecdote, I can recall my father coming home with his first handheld calculator, which did 4 functions and square root. And he was quite proud of that calculator that cost him $300. Today, they're given away at trade shows as a thank you for visiting at a booth. And so we see the same thing in computers, and prices are dropping very dramatically as processors get faster and as we work through sort of the manufacturing curve. We're seeing prices drop dramatically.
Okay, we have a question now from Lima, from the Universidad Nacional de Ingeniería in Lima. Welcome. Your question, please.
La pregunta, adelante Lima, por favor. Buenos días.
Aquí desde Perú.
We are calling you from Peru.
Tenemos 2 preguntas.
We have 2 questions.
Una relativa a
One is related to security on the internet.
Hoy hablamos mucho de que las
We
empresas
spoke
mueven el internet
a lot about internet and business on the internet by companies and businesses. What is the state of security? What is the status? How can businesses feel okay doing business on the internet, and how can they rest assured that everything will be in private and have that confidence? And now the other question is there any initiative for us to have some way of controlling so that the minors don't have access to pornography that is on the internet? And we know that there are several pornography sites on the internet. How can we control our children?
2 questions. Take your pick.
I'll start with the first question. As it relates,
I'll take the pornography later.
and I'll let you. Let me just address the security issue quickly. There are 2 schools of thought on security, to put it candidly. One says that security is as much a matter of culture and custom and habit as it is anything else. Which is to say that if you were to valet park your automobile, I heard a gentleman from Sun Microsystems use this analogy. Every time you valet park an automobile, should you choose to do that, you have given your keys to a stranger. And the same kind of situation exists on the web, which is to say that if someone wants information, they can get it. There are a number of great security devices that are being employed, including encryption, that will make that better.
In regard to the second question, just briefly, again, I have a slightly off the mainstream point of view of this. I personally feel that families should be the primary means of controlling the access of minor children to the Internet. However, I recognize not everybody feels that way. Many people feel that there should be some more formal arrangement, and indeed technology does exist for websites to be given what is effectively a rating. In other words, that there is some embedded code in the web page which is a guide to parents and other people as to the strength of the content of that page. And of course technology then exists to make those pages, certain pages, inaccessible.
Is that technology available?
Oh yes, it is. In fact, there's more than one competing version of that technology.
We have a question now from Caracas, from the Universidad Central de Venezuela. Welcome. Your question, please.
Universidad Central de Venezuela. Bad sound. Bad sound. I'm sorry. Adelante, Venezuela. Hello.
Yes, hello. We are having trouble hearing you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity given to us. Now, thank you. We have two questions in one. What is the cost tendency, trend in cost and services on the Internet? And what can you say about the copyright or intellectual property of the countries that participate and who participate on Internet? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I'll take the intellectual property question, and I'll just tell you that there's an entire body of law now that is being written. We're really forging new ground. We're into an entirely new area of the law, and there are many, many questions that still remain to be resolved in that area. The caller is right on. That's a significant issue.
I'm not sure I understood the first question. Could you repeat that? Michael, did you hear it? The first part of the question had to do with cost.
Cost, yes.
Cost of
services.
Cost of, I think I'd have to hear the question in a bit more detail to give a more sensible answer to that.
Okay. Perhaps we can come back to that.
Okay.
We have a question from Nogales, from the Instituto Tecnológico de Nogales in Sonora. Welcome. Your question, please.
Good morning. I am Mario Estrella from Nogales. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My question is, what are the specific, what is being done in Mexico specifically as far as the Internet and the web for business, the business world? For example, what kind of connections and what is the time frame? How do you connect? Connectivity. What is the current connectivity in Mexico? What do you know about that?
Okay. A specific regional question.
I can answer at least a portion of the question for the caller and perhaps get some additional information back to him later if he wants to contact the ITC. How's that? I can't answer the entire question for you. I can tell you this. Mexico is in the process now of committing significant dollars of its own along with its partners to upgrade the infrastructure of the nation. An example, they are in the process now of implementing a large frame relay network, and I spoke of frame relay in my earlier recorded comments. That will provide a significant means of access for businesses in Mexico to the Internet as well as to its trading partners. And so through the participation of companies like my own company, Southwestern Bell Corporation, and its partnership with Telmex, these are pieces of infrastructure are being put in place even as we speak. And I'd be happy to get some additional information offline.
Mm-hmm. And things are happening so quickly that one can sense there's no hope one week, and the next week have everything in place. It's surprising to me, the speed of evolution.
Stay tuned. You're going to be seeing in my presentation coming up very shortly an example of the fact that there are plenty of Mexicans, at least on Internet Relay Chat.
We have a question now from the Instituto Politécnico Nacional in Reynosa, in Tamaulipas. Welcome. Your question, please.
Sí, muy buenos días.
Good morning.
De aquí, desde el Centro de Educación
Calling you
Continua
from the Continuous
del
Education
Instituto
Center,
Politécnico Nacional,
Polytechnical
Unidad
Institute,
Reynosa.
the unit in
Tenemos dos
Reynosa,
preguntas
in Mexico.
que se pueden resumir al
We have
respecto
two
de
questions.
seguridad.
This is
La primera
regarding
es, ¿cuál es
security
la
issues again.
tendencia hacia
What
la
is
seguridad
the
personal
trend toward
de cada usuario
personal
en la red?
security of the users of the
Que puede
net?
resultar una amenaza
For
para la
instance,
privacidad de
could
las
this
personas.
be a problem
Y la
with the
segunda
person's
es la siguiente.
privacy? And then
Bueno.
the other aspect I would like you to.
Mi nombre es Ricardo Acosta. ¿sí?
My
Y
name
del
is
Centro de Educación
Ricardo
Continua en Reynosa.
Acosta, and I have the
¿Cuáles
other
son las
question.
medidas de seguridad
What are the security
que
measures
se tienen para
available
colocar información
to
en la red de
place
Internet
information on the internet
que no sea negativa
that is not a
para
negative
manejar
one
grupos en
when it comes
sentido
to
religioso
religious groups,
o
for
para
instance,
desestabilizar
or
grupos
to
políticos.
destabilize political
Ya que existen
groups,
varios
because there are
riesgos.
several risks.
¿Sí? ¿Qué nos pueden informar al respecto?
What can you tell us about this? So there are two questions.
All right, several aspects of security.
Can I address the general question of privacy? First of all, I want to set the caller's mind at rest that in the mere consumption of information on the World Wide Web, web pages, there is practically no chance whatsoever that you can be identified personally. It is indeed true that it's possible, and my own company does quite a bit of work in this regard, that when we log what we call the process of logging, namely recording who visits the pages, there is some information about that person's origin, but it does not give an email address. Now, if you go into the realm of Internet Relay Chat, it is extremely easy for people to find out your email address. But that is as far as it goes. The question of personal privacy, of guarding your personal space, rests entirely in the hands of whoever gives you your Internet access. Typically here in California, access would be had through a commercial provider who clearly would know your real name, your real street address, and your telephone number. You have to depend absolutely on that person, not ever to allow somebody who has your email address to come to him and convert that into a real address. It's even become an issue here in the United States of America as to whether it's appropriate to even give that information to law enforcement agencies. At the moment, I believe that the legal situation is that, yes, the Federal Bureau of Investigation could force a service provider to divulge that information, but nobody else.
Hal?
I think that the matter of security, and I think just the fact that we've received as many calls as we have, speaks to the fact it's top of mind in so many people's minds right now. And in fact, this could easily be, perhaps Dr. Cardenas could use this as a topic for a future telecast, because it is very large and very vast. We can speak to it from the individual user. Security really starts with who do you allow, do you give passwords out? And of course, you would never want to give your passwords to anyone, but it really begins right there. And it extends from the individual and who we allow to have access to our things locally, all the way up through and including the use of security servers that actually act as the term is a firewall, which sits in front of that very important information, which we may not want divulged, for instance, to our competitors or to individuals who don't have the need for access. So there's an entire industry that's being built around the creation of encryption, firewall, and secure access to information. And certainly this is a significant issue.
We go now to Panama, to the Panama Canal Commission. Welcome. Your question, please.
Comisión del Canal de Panamá. Bienvenida a la pregunta.
muy buenos días. Nuestra
Good
pregunta
morning.
es la
Our
siguiente.
question is the following.
¿Cuál es la importancia
What is the
del
importance
entrenamiento
of
en
the
la implementación de estas nuevas tecnologías?
training to implement these new technologies?